Hey everyone, welcome to Just Win with Wanda, a podcast designed to highlight people and their game winning passions. Hey everyone, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or laptop. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Also, what's really interesting is that you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to the final episode of this season of Just Win with Wanda. I'm here with some incredible guests, Dr. Ashley Parker, who's an attending physician with Ventura Medical Group in South Jersey, Dr. Adekemi Akano, who's a faculty anesthesiologist at the University of Pennsylvania, and with Dr. Linda Corley, who's an attending anesthesiologist with Anesthesia Services PA, servicing most of Christiana Care Health System in Delaware. Thanks so much, ladies, for tuning in. I'm really excited to have you to talk a little bit about your journey as Black female physicians, what you had to overcome, the highlights, what you're enjoying about it, and really hopefully spill some tea to those that are aspiring to be in your position so they can be well equipped. So let's kick it off with, at what point did you realize you wanted to become a physician?
Yeah, well, my parents are African, so I really had like three choices career-wise. But growing up, I kind of narrowed it down at the end of high school. I was either going to become a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, and you know a little bit about my story, but my family suffered through a lot through like immigration. My mom was deported, so I developed a passion for law, and I wanted to be either an immigration lawyer or a doctor, two like totally different things. But after talking with my dad and his friends, they kind of like swayed me a little bit more towards the medicine side. And, I had a passion for both. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm here.
What about you, Dr. Kemi? How did you decide that you wanted to become a physician?
For me, I guess it was a little similar to Linda. Through high school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. My parents always told me I love to argue, so at some point I thought maybe I should be a lawyer.
Sounds like
I
a
really
lyric.
I gravitated towards the hard sciences. I think it was what I was good at, what I thought was interesting. And then through college, I ended up going more into the medical sciences. Even then, I thought I might do PhD work. I was interested in psychology. So I took 2 years off after college to do some research. I was working as a TA in a lab for developmental psychology. I realized that research was just too far removed from working with actual people. And I did want that human contact. So after 2 years of doing that, I decided to pursue a career in actual medicine.
Nice. And what about you, Dr. Ashley?
I was a nerd for most of my life. And in third grade, I was like, I think I want to be a doctor. I liked science over everything else. I wasn't really a reader, history, literature, that was not my thing. And as soon as ninth grade hit and we got to dissect frogs, I was like, yes, this is it.
Is that a universal thing that they make everyone dissect frogs?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't
I
remember
didn't do frog
dissecting
lab. We did
frogs.
pigs.
You did pigs? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, your
Oh,
school had a good
wow.
budget.
Yeah, y'all had we got little
Oh,
frogs,
Canada.
they
Yeah,
stunk.
yeah, we had a whole pig.
Yeah. So just a disclaimer, for those who don't know, Dr. Kemi is Canadian Nigerian. So her journey is very unique as an international student, and we'll get into, how that pathway was for her. But it's interesting to see that you all have different kind of moments when you realize that you wanted to be a physician, whether it was through the influence of your parents or just natural curiosity. But what are your thoughts on the current generation of kids who now kind of want to become, social influencers? Not a lot of them have the desire to become, doctors and lawyers. What are your general thoughts about that transition?
I feel like you can do both. And there are plenty of physicians who are also social media influencers. I think where kind of the problem lies if you just direct your energy solely towards this. One, it's incredibly competitive. It's way more difficult than it seems, meaning being a media influencer. And this is something that might fade. This is a temporary thing that's popular at this time, and you want to have a lifelong legacy. And helping people in the areas of medicine and being a lawyer and all those things, those necessities will never go away. And someone needs to fill those spots. You don't want to be elderly and have no doctors. You don't want your parents to be elderly and have no doctors.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Mhm.
Any one else want to chime in?
Well, I mean, my perspective is a little different in that I feel like us growing up, especially of parents who weren't born here and aren't from here, we get instilled in us that you have to work up the ladder and like take one of these traditional jobs. And I think that's where a lot of that influence came from on us. Like you have to become a doctor or a lawyer, an engineer or something like that. I actually think it's great that the new generation doesn't necessarily feel like they have to work up some sort of a ladder and they want to be self-sufficient, want to be entrepreneurs, and they have a different type of spirit. It's great, but it does have to be kind of channeled and directed in a certain way. Otherwise, you have all of these people who are not really fulfilling their purpose in life. And I feel like it's interesting. I have a little brother. My sister and I are about 5 years apart in age, and she's becoming a doctor as well. She's going into surgery. But then my younger brother, he's not interested in medicine at all. And he doesn't necessarily have like a traditional career path in mind. He's a lot more creative. And it's interesting to try to figure out how to kind of nurture that too, because we're so used to nurturing people for like pursuing those traditional paths. But I think it can be good either way.
Yeah, I agree with both perspectives. I think there are some people who naturally gravitate towards the more creative type of careers. And I think social media, this boom has really created an opportunity for people in all sorts of different types of careers. Like entrepreneurship has just like taken off, people having
Mhm.
found ways to start off businesses without necessarily having to go through traditional routes. So I would never want to poo-poo anybody who is interested in starting a career in that way. But I do think there is also value in education, value in finding some type of structured way of implementing your career and always having something to fall back on if those new and exciting and flashy light creative ways of making money kind of fall off. So
Yeah, those are all really good points. And I remember I came across a meme that said, I'm glad that we have all these social influencers, but, you know, what if something breaks down? I need an electrician or I need call it a plumber. Like we need some people to go to trade schools too, because we still need to function as a society. So it is interesting to find that balance between, hard skills, but still tapping into that right side of the brain and nurturing your creative side. Which brings me to my next point. A question that I'm sure you all get as mentors is, how do you stand out as a candidate if you're trying to go to med school, even residency? I know traditionally, maybe like years back, they wanted to see like the hardcore sciences. You couldn't really major in other things, but I'm hearing that that's changing. Can you speak to that transition and how someone that's trying to apply to med school, how they can stand out as a candidate?
I feel like everyone has such an individual and unique path. Like the best thing you can do to stand out is to be as authentic as possible. And that's kind of the path that I took anytime I would interview with someone or do any sort of applications. Like just tell your story, just be super authentic and don't try to fit into this cookie cutter idea of what you think a medical student or a doctor should be. And I feel like the more authentic you are, the more you're able to connect with whoever's reading your profile or reading your story. And I mean, I think that gives you an edge up more than anything.
As generic as this may sound, being well-rounded matters. You should do well in your coursework that you need in order to get into medical school, but not only for applications, but just for your mental well-being. It's important that you find balance in your life and reflect that in what you're doing and when you apply for school.
yeah, there has definitely been a big shift in terms of what medical schools, quote unquote, are looking for. I think that previously the push for having candidates who are, have hard science backgrounds, are, into research, are, doing XYZ in the scientific fields, that's kind of been pushed aside. And we're seeing more and more applicants who are being accepted and coveted who come from non-traditional backgrounds, so to say. We're seeing a lot of people who are transitioning fields, coming from maybe different trades that they were working in and now wanting to get involved in medicine, people who have college degrees in the arts. I mean, of course, you still have to do your prerequisites in order to, do the MCAT and get acceptance, but there's no need for you to do a major that you're not interested in or pursue research that you're not interested in. Do what you like to do and be able to speak passionately about it, and people will see that and people will value that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good feedback. And I think that applies to any role that you're interested in. I know for pharmacy, we tend to have like a pretty strict background, but people are becoming more open to other majors so long as you're fulfilling the prerequisites that they need you to and you're doing a good job testing wise. But I just wanted to kind of get into your backgrounds a little bit deeper. So I know, Dr. Kemi, you came from Canada, then you came to the US. And then Dr. Ashley, I know you went to Drexel for medical school. And then Dr. Linda, you went to Meharry. So you all have very different backgrounds. So how was that initial first step into this new world where everyone is essentially going after the same thing? Can you speak to your initial experience and, maybe some challenges that you faced, or like how did you overcome that initial like shock factor of, oh my gosh, I'm going to become a physician at the end of the 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to med school at Meharry, which is an HBCU. And I also went to college in an HBCU called Virginia State University. So I think the biggest shock factor was for me was it was a big culture shock. And I knew that like stepping into a place like Penn was going to be totally different because I mean, going to med school at Meharry is like a utopia. Like all the physicians are Black and like the nurses and, everyone else is white. And it was just, it was like being a part of a huge family where all your aunts and uncles are your teachers and your attendings. So coming into a place like Penn, I still saw people that looked like me. As you know, Kemi was one of my classmates in residency, and it was a pretty diverse program in comparison to a lot of other ones that I've seen. But it was a huge culture shock. But I feel like coming from an HBCU gives you a certain level of confidence in yourself and what you can bring to the table. And it was interesting to me because I thought it was going to be a lot more of a challenge than it actually was. Like I felt like really confident coming in, and I think that my background in itself just kind of makes me a more adaptable person. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
For me, I dealt with a lot of self-doubt at the start of my medical school journey. As you mentioned, Wanda, I came from Canada. I had applied for the Canadian match for medical school 2 years in a row. The second year, I also decided to apply to some US medical schools because Canadian schools just historically are very challenging to get in. There's not as many schools available as there are in the US, and it's kind of like a bottleneck effect. There's way more applicants who are pre-med than there are medical school spots. And there's way more medical students than there are residency spots. So there's kind of like a bottleneck effect in the Canadian medical school education program, all the way from college to residency and getting your first physician job. So I decided to apply to the US. I ended up getting accepted to George Washington, where I attended school, but kind of coming off of like 2 years of trying to get into med school and now going to George Washington, which is kind of like, an Ivy League school. A lot of the classmates I had came from families who, both of their parents are physicians. All of their siblings are also either in med school or physicians. They come from a long line of basically just knowing how to navigate the hospital, feeling like this is a place where they're meant to be. There was never any question. Whereas me, on the other hand, I'm the first medical doctor in my family. So that came with we talk about imposter syndrome, which I do think affects Black people more than whites and women probably more than men. That feeling of, do I deserve to be here? So that took me probably my first year of medical school to really feel like, you know what, like this is definitely challenging. It's definitely hard, but I worked my butt off and I deserve to be here. I deserve this opportunity as much as anybody else. And I'm going to kill it. I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to, you know, see what interests me, which field I want to go into. And I'm going to pursue that and I'm going to thrive. So medical school was challenging. It's definitely difficult. The coursework was difficult for me. The rotations were difficult, but I think if you apply yourself and you focus, you can do well. And I made a lot of close friendships in med school as well, which was important for me in maintaining my mental health. You know, I'm all about balance. I'm all about, you know, work hard, play hard, have your friendships, have your vacations, have your family time, and get through it.
I entered medical school in a relatively non-traditional route. I completed my undergrad education and I was a neuroscience major. I did not have a ton of support when it came to mentorship and aiding in the application process for medical school. I struggled. I went to Washington and Lee, which is maybe 4% African American, small liberal arts, affluent Caucasian population. And it was in the South, it was a culture shock. So I struggled both socially and indirectly than academically. So I ended up doing a post-bac program at Drexel. And that actually was probably the best thing that could have ever happened. Like it was justifying in that you sample medical school coursework and I did well and I excelled and I had excellent support there. And so I think that 1 year program boosted my confidence in a way where at least the first 2 didactic years of medical school came relatively easily because I knew that I could do it already. Whereas if I had entered straight in, it probably would have been way more complicated than that. Um, so, you know, going straight through school is not everyone's path, and you can find a lesson in every kind of bend in the road. And I'm grateful for my bends and turns. Um, it is challenging when you enter the workforce. So residency presents a new challenge when you're interacting with patients. People are not necessarily accustomed to seeing physicians that look like us. And when you're in a position of authority, that it presents new challenges.
I know there is this misconception that it's a very linear path, and some people think that it's easy. And I want to take this time to break it down, break down those misconceptions, break down any myths about, the steps that you all have to take to get to where you are. Can someone kind of chime in about the different exams that you have to pass, like the different steps? Because I think it's important for the average person to really understand, when you see an attending, it's not just, oh, they just got here and, like they actually put in work. Anyone want to just chime in for a second just to break that down for us?
Well, I mean, it's different for every specialty, but starting off, you have to take your MCAT. That's your medical school admissions test. And generally you want to take that about a year before before you plan to start school. Because once you take that exam, you can put in your applications and the whole application process takes about a year. Then once you get into medical school, you think you got over a hump because the MCAT, you passed it, and now you can just take your classes. But I'll say the first exam in medical school was probably harder to me than the MCAT. Yeah. And then you have all of your course exams. And I think, what is the next big step? Step 1 is your next big step. So after your second year of medical school, and the structure has changed a little bit because a lot of schools are moving more towards doing your rotations earlier. But when I was going to medical school, your first 2 years, you learned all of your core sciences, and then you took a big exam called Step 1, the USMLE Step 1. And that basically gave you a 3-digit numeric score that pretty much determined your medical future, like to a large extent. So if you scored well enough on that, a lot of subspecialties would open up to you. Whereas if you didn't score as well, or if you did not pass, then that was a whole other hurdle that you had to overcome and take again. So then after step 1, there's step 2 that you take the following year after you've done your clinical rotations. And those 2 scores, along with your USMLE step 2 CS, which is now no longer happening, which I'm so jealous of the people now that don't have to take it. But all of those exams kind of determine to a large extent what subspecialty you can get into. Those exams cost money as well. I don't remember how much the MCAT was,
A lot.
but it was a lot. And then step 1 is, what is it, $800 something. You're doing your prep courses for that. So that's another 1,000 or something plus your books. Your step 2 is a lot too. And then step 2 CS, I believe at the time was like 1,200. And so it was, wow. Okay. So then that's just during medical school. And then depending on what subspecialty you choose, I mean, we chose anesthesiology, which has more exams probably than a lot of the other subspecialties. So then you get into residency, you have to take step 3. This is the 3-part USMLE exam. You take the basic exam, your CA 1 year, at the end of your CA 1 year, which is another $800 and something. Then you take the advanced exam. You take in-training exams every year of residency. And then your advanced exam is at the end of your anesthesiology residency. And now we have to take the oral boards and the OSCEs. So I don't know how many exams that was, but it's a lot. And that's just like the board exams. That's not counting your internal exams with each course. And what were those little boards called that you had to take? You know how you take your, like in surgery, at the end of your surgery block, the exam you take at the end
Shelf
of that.
exams.
The shelf exams. You see, so many. It's a lot, and it's a lot of money. Listen, that's why you have to really have a passion for this in order to get through, because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, if anyone was keeping track, I think we almost got to like 5K. So that is a lot of money. I know some individuals are privileged to go ahead.
It's at least 5K because now our oral boards are what,
$2,400.
Yeah.
And that's not including like the exam prep and stuff. So
yeah, so
and don't let you have to repeat one, then I don't know.
The steps just get more expensive as you go along. The exams themselves are also longer. So your step 1 is like 1 day. Your step 2, if they bring back the CS, which they may not, is going to be 2 different days. And then the step 3 is 2 days. If I recall, it feels so distant.
Yeah, it was 2 days. Yeah.
And
wow,
so
we took an exam for 2 days.
And so the board exams, once you get into your medical specialty, are exponentially more expensive.
Yeah.
And oral boards are, I don't know if it's the same for anesthesiology. They only have it at one site in the whole country. So ours is in Dallas.
Nice.
So you have to pay to fly and your boarding plus your exam and all of that, because there's nowhere else you can take it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's the same for us, but now in the pandemic, they're trying to do it virtually. So we'll see.
But they're still charging real money.
They're still charging the same amount.
Exactly.
That's crazy. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't know about. Like they just think, these are standardized tests that are funded by your programs or they're subsidized some way, and it's not. So it's a matter of saving for them, or if you have a mentor, knowing in advance how much to kind of save up for. And if you don't, like, how do you bring out $2,000 for an exam? It's very crazy. Which brings me to my next point. I know, Kemi, you kind of talked about, the value of balancing your friendships, your personal life, and, your journey through medical school. Something that I've also heard about this journey that you all have kind of embarked on is it can be challenging and it can be straining on your relationships, your friendships. How did you all, balance that out? Or what advice do you have for individuals that may be going through that kind of sticky time in their life where they have to focus on their studies, but they don't want to lose all their friends, or, they want to still make out time to, make special events? How did you all balance that out?
You have to have people around you that understand, because there's really no, it's not actually a balance. I think balance is really a misnomer that we use a lot, but it's not a balance at all. In medical school, you're studying every day for like at least 10 hours. So there's no, let's balance that. If you try to balance and give other people the same amount of time that you allot to your studies, you're just going to fail. And so I feel like having people around you, or having, for me, I met my husband after my first year of medical school. And he was just really understanding that this is my focus right now and I have to get through this. And, you know, if I have to meet up with you after I study, or if you have to hang out with me alongside me and my friends studying, then that's what we're going to do. But it's really about having the right kind of people around you that are understanding and that won't hold that against you or make you feel guilty for pursuing your dreams in such an aggressive way. um, and yeah, your family too, your friends, they just all have to be super understanding. And if they're not, I mean, you just can't really, you can't let that get to you and make you feel like you need to compromise what you're doing, because medicine really takes, like, especially in the training period and study period, it takes most of you.
I think that it's a test of your true friendships. So, like you
Mhm.
previously mentioned, the people who want to be there for you will be there for you, despite the fact that you may have the inability to do the same for them at that time. Um, I think most of my like lifer friends are all in medicine at this point because it's understood, or at least in some professional field, where it's understood that at some point you have to dedicate time to this one thing and I will be back and I still love you.
Mhm.
My husband is also in medicine. So it's understood. We'll be sitting next to each other on our computer doing whatever we need to finish for the day. No one's upset about it. We all eat. We do something that's not medicine together, and then we go to bed. And nobody has hard feelings about it. So I think relationships will change probably throughout your training and your career. And some people may fall off, but you'll definitely gain new friends along the way. And I honestly don't feel badly about anyone who decided that they weren't down for this journey.
Same.
Um, it's just like any other trying time in your life where you kind of find out who someone truly is. This is one of those times.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for me, the challenge was kind of twofold because I was very far away from home. My family obviously was a flight away. My close friends that I grew up with, that I went to school with, were also a flight away. So I think not just the journey in medicine, but also the distance was kind of a test of how strong some of my friendships were. And, you know, my family has always been very, very, very supportive. I could not ask for a more supportive family. And just the time that we spent together became that much more valuable. Planning trips for my friends to come visit me, or me going back home and visiting the people that I love, or us planning a trip together to get away. All of this pre-COVID, of course. But those, you know, those would kind of be moments that would bond us a little bit closer. And the friends that I have that I still have to this day, like we kind of went through that process together, and I'm forever grateful for them for, you know, sending me messages of support, FaceTiming me when they knew I had a big exam coming up, things like that. So I definitely think it's important to have people in your corner that understand what you're going through and that are just there to support you in whatever way that they can.
So my next question is around, your next step. I know, Linda, you alluded to this earlier about your test results kind of narrowing your choices in terms of specialties.
Mhm.
But for those, let's say, you have a certain score, you have a variety of options. How did you all determine what you were going to specialize in? Was it based on passion or strengths? Just wanted to get a little bit more into that.
Yeah, so for me, I actually did an away rotation while I was in medical school, and that was pretty common at that time, where you can go somewhere and kind of do a little bit of a preceptorship as a medical student. And so I went to CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and did a peds anesthesia rotation, which was affiliated with the residency program I ended up going to at Penn. And so while I was there, I had a fabulous experience. Like, I loved everything about it. And at that point, I think I was still narrowing down specialties. But that's when I decided, like, I definitely wanted to do anesthesia for sure. And I thought for sure I wanted to do peds anesthesia. But yeah, I mean, I think the hands-on experience tells you more than anything. And then I got a glimpse of the program, got to meet some of the residents, got to meet the chair and the program director. And so, yeah, I mean, getting that hands-on experience, there's like nothing like it.
Yeah, I agree. At my medical school, actually, a lot of the subspecialties were not really a core part of our curriculum. Like anesthesiology, you could have done it or not done it. ENT wasn't really a core rotation, orthopedics, dermatology, a lot of the core specialties that people end up choosing to go into are not really thrown at you. You have to kind of seek it out or have some type of reason for wanting to seek it out. So, some people might have family members or have heard a lot about anesthesia for whatever reason and decide to take an elective in anesthesia. For me, it was kind of word of mouth. I had initially been interested in pursuing neurology. So I did an early rotation in neurology and another rotation in peds neurology and another rotation in neurology. And after those basically 3 months that I'd spent doing neurology, I decided, wow, like I really came to med school thinking I would do neurology, but I really don't think it's for me. It's too much office work. I need something to keep me busy. I do get bored easily. I feel like I need to be a little bit more active on the job in order for me to be fulfilled on a day-to-day basis. So I decided to do an elective in anesthesia, and it was perfect for me because it really combined a lot of like neurophysiology, which I've always been interested in. My undergraduate education was in neurosciences and mental health. I was interested in neurology, so the neurophysiology that I could apply and neuropharmacology, all of that kind of stuff, all while working directly with my hands. And I think anesthesia has probably the highest percentage of direct patient interaction on a day-to-day basis than a lot of other specialties offer. So that was important to me as well. And then in terms of picking an actual residency program, for me, I wanted to pick something that I knew would open up doors for me afterwards. So that was important. I wanted to also stay on the East Coast because it's kind of closer to where my family is, close to Toronto and Canada. So a lot of the big name sort of programs on the East Coast, whether it's like, um, I guess Hopkins would have been one of them. Penn was another big name where you just know you're going to go there, you're going to get great training, and having that on your applications when you're looking for jobs, I just knew would open up doors for me. So that's a big reason why I chose it.
So in choosing OBGYN, it was not on my radar initially. I was very certain that I wanted to be a neurosurgeon when I was younger. And then I realized how long that residency was. And I was like, hey, I want to have a life. I want to get married. I want to have children. And it's not impossible, but it's a lot harder for the female to be the neurosurgery resident who's having children and, taking that time off. And so through a combination of personal experiences, I was like, maybe I'll do psychiatry. But when I was in medical school and had my surgical subspecialties, so general surgery and OBGYN, I was like, hey, I like using my hands. I do it well. And there's something about fixing something tangible. Like you have a fibroid, I can remove it and it's fixed. That's very satisfying. And that's something that I wouldn't have gotten through, not that kind of feeling through psychiatry. And there's no shortage of psychopathology, no matter what specialty you go into. So I'm not missing out on the counseling perspective. So that's what ultimately helped me to make my decision to choose OBGYN.
So that's really interesting. I think, like I mentioned before, some people, they think one way, they want to be a pediatrician because they love their pediatrician. Some people want to follow in the footsteps of their parents, some of them were surgeons, so naturally they wanted to become a surgeon. So I think it's always interesting to kind of dig deeper to see at what point did you realize what you wanted to specialize in. Something that I've always been curious about is, once you commit to a specialty, like how is that process as far as, can you change your mind, or is there a certain point where that's it, you have to commit and follow through? Can you guys talk about that journey?
You can always change your mind.
Mhm.
That's not going to be easy though. So when you apply to your residency in whatever specialty you choose, it's a match process. So it's a combination of how programs that you've interacted with or interviewed with rank you versus how you rank the programs that you interviewed at. And they use an algorithm to match you together. So once you're in the position that you've matched into, you can choose, sometimes that's categorical and sometimes that's a preliminary spot, meaning the year before you start your actual specialty, depending on what you choose. Um, you can choose to change after that prelim year, or for me, I did a categorical position. That's where the challenge comes in. You're going to start over essentially. So I'm not going to be able to go to plastic surgery and not complete the first year. I would have to reapply, have letters, which is probably more challenging than it would have been had I chose that specialty directly out of medical school, because you don't have the exposure to the people who can actually help you. It's not impossible. It's just you have to be very intentional when you switch specialties in order to gain the letters, any representation that you would be a good fit in order to change the specialty. Because people will look and say, hey, but why did you do this? And why are you choosing this now? And you have to have a good answer.
In anesthesia, I think we often see people transitioning from whatever specialty they were in to be in anesthesia. I hardly ever see it the other way around for whatever reason. Shameless plug
That's
for
what I was gonna say.
but
Yeah.
but Linda, Linda and I did residency together, and we can probably like more than 5 people, more than maybe even like around 10 people that we can probably name that came from different specialties and chose to transition to anesthesia from fields like neurology, orthopedics, general surgery, um, whatever, with urology, because they were feeling unfulfilled in the field that they chose. And the point at which people have transitioned varies. There's people who completed just the intern year and decided right away, like, oh, maybe they decided halfway through the intern year that this is definitely not for me, and started working on how can they apply into something different, such as anesthesia. There's people who completed their entire residency. We have people who did entire pediatric residencies or entire neurology residencies and decided that being just a practicing general pediatrician or general neurologist was not going to be fulfilling enough for them. And they then applied for a whole new residency. For transitioning into anesthesia, then you have to complete 3 years, because we actually do 3 years of anesthesia. And the first year is a general intern year, which if you come from another field, however many years of residency that you did would apply for that intern year. So then you only now have to complete the 3 years of anesthesia training. So I've heard, different experiences in terms of how challenging that has been. I think transitioning within the same institution seems to be a little bit easier than transitioning to a whole nother institution, simply because you have people within that institution who can speak to people for you, who can advocate for you. You can meet with people directly before the match even necessarily opens. And that becomes a little bit easier than kind of reapplying for the match entirely and joining a new institution in their program.
I definitely agree. And I mean, all this to say, I mean, it's hard to transition from one subspecialty or specialty to another. I think that in the decision-making process for your subspecialty, it's important to consider lifestyle. Like, I feel like when I was in medical school, it was kind of looked down upon for you to like consider lifestyle pretty high on your list. Um, in comparison to some of the other factors. But I think it's really important because when we see people who transition from other specialties into anesthesia, a lot of times it's not just the work you do on a day-to-day basis or how fun this is or how fun this is, but lifestyle is like a really, really big component. And not just the lifestyle of what the resident goes through, because I mean, residency is tough just across the board, but the lifestyle of and attending in that specialty that you're looking at, like I think it's more important than people give credit to when you're choosing a specialty, because you're thinking about like, how is this going to fit with the rest of my life? Am I going to be happy if I have to spend 80 to $100 at work for the rest of my life? Like, is that realistic for you? So it's hard. It's hard to change your mind and start over. It can take some years out of your training and out of your life. But if you make the right decision initially and you're really honest with yourself in deciding on a specialty, it just makes things a lot easier for you.
I agree 100%. And can we talk about that for a minute? Like how frowned upon choosing a specialty for a lifestyle or for compensation? Like, did anybody go through all of this? I mean, of course, we all want to help our patients. We want to have a fulfilling career, but none of us can say that we would have done this for free.
No, we all have a certain level of nobility, but at the end of the day, you want to make good money. You want to be able to pay off all these loans you took out, and you want to be happy in life. Like, why is that so hard to say out loud without being like shamed? It's ridiculous.
I want to offer perspective on this. I think we're all living comfortably as attendings. I would not qualify, and maybe it's because I'm a lowly general OBGYN, but I would not qualify myself as being wealthy. I am capable of paying my bills. I am capable of paying towards my student loans. I think the investment in time and money, as we all spoke about, that you invest in this, like there is a level of nobility because, and when you think about it, the compensation doesn't quite match in reality. So for people who are pursuing it, you should consider, because you have to live, you should consider your compensation. But you also have to be truly passionate about this because this is not for the faint at heart.
Exactly.
Yep. And you guys spoke about the five grand just to take exams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think twice.
If you want to be rich, this is not it.
No.
There's definitely easier ways to get rich. This is not.
Yep. And as we discussed at the very beginning, social media, become an influencer. There's some other avenues you consider. So kind of taking a pivot to where you are now in your journeys, as you all know, but unfortunately some individuals may not know, Black female physicians only account for less than 3% of the physician population. So how is your experience as a young Black female in the hospital?
For me, it's twofold. One, I kind of tend to be more positive and look at things from a positive perspective. So I kind of feel like a unicorn in the hospital, and I kind of, talk myself up in that way. So I see a lot of patients that look like me and they're like surprised that I'm their physician. But a lot of times they'll give me like some affirmation, like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And like, this is amazing. And, they really, really open up to me. So I really treasure that and value that. On the same token, I do get a lot of, you look too young to be my doctor. And sometimes it's the too young, but sometimes it's just like, you looked at me and you just assumed that I wasn't your physician, And I don't feel that, especially where I am now, I don't feel that I've ever been like disrespected because of my color. But it's hard because you just never know, like, can you really pinpoint when somebody is like overtly discriminating against you? They can always like embellish it as something else or say it's because of this or it's because of that. So it's tough. And I feel like what's been even more tough is in this current climate where there's always a new story and everybody has been seeing like the George Floyds and the civil rights movement and the new civil rights movement, the mass incarceration, all these things that are now coming into like normal conversation, and seeing like a Trump presidency and white supremacists storming the Capitol and like just navigating those kind of conversations at work. That's tough. That's a tough that I didn't foresee coming into this field, just because I think for so long it was something that like could just be covert, and now it's just like kind of out in the open, like, so it's an interesting experience. Some days I'm feeling great and just feeling like, the Black Panther. I always wear a Black Panther hat at work, and I like kind of I don't shy away from my Blackness or try to like really fit in or anything. I feel like I can really be myself.
Similarly, I'll say that there's two sides to that coin. There will be no shortage of microaggressions, but that's going to be almost any place we try to navigate in life, any career. In medicine, has been historically dominated by Caucasian men, and only in recent years has that trend kind of changed to be a more diverse professional population. I will say that it's going to depend on where you are as a physician, how you're perceived somewhat, and how progressive those people are at whatever institution. I don't think any of us has been a stranger at some point in our either training or career in being assumed to be the person who's going to take the tray out of the patient room in the hospital. I mentioned this earlier, a hesitancy to, or a resistance to calling you the doctor, where that is your role on the patient care team. And people either referring to you by your first name in the patient's room, or the patient themselves referring to you as nurse. And there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. That just doesn't happen to be my role on the team at the time. And the assumption that the man who's present, who may be a resident, is the attending physician, and they look at them like they're the boss and the decision maker, or the ultimate decision maker. And I think you have to finesse navigating that without, because unfortunately you don't want to be perceived as an angry Black woman. And it's often to misconstrue someone advocating for themselves as such. The other side is, and I think this is honestly why I continue to do this. I chose a profession that has high litigation. I chose a profession that has extreme highs and devastating lows. And everyone knows that like maternal morbidity and mortality, especially amongst African Americans in this country at this time, is like unacceptably high. And I think that me being a physician that someone can turn to and their response to it, especially an African American woman, is the most fulfilling thing I've ever experienced. The joy that you'll see on someone's face when you come into the room. Oh my God, you're my doctor. I can't believe it. I feel so much more comfortable. And they'll express exactly what they want to know. Whereas I've heard in other spaces, a patient be like, the physician treated me like I was ignorant or stupid, and they didn't address my concerns. And I felt that I needed to go somewhere else, or I'm so glad that I landed here where I feel that the care is genuine. It's not to say that it isn't elsewhere, but the reality is, the statistics show that care is subpar despite education level for African American women, despite socioeconomic status. And if I can play a role in changing that, it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's very fulfilling, as Ashley mentioned, the interactions that we can have with our patients who are minorities. I think at my hospital, I'm not sure about the hospitals you two work at, but I think a lot of our patients that come in are visible minorities. We have a lot of Black male, Black women patients that we take care of. And it's only natural for, as a patient, to come in, you want to see people that look like you. You feel more comfortable being taken care of by people who look like you. So it is such a fulfilling feeling to have a patient say, like, oh, wow, like, this is my doctor. I have people who've been like, on FaceTime with their family members, like, oh, mom, look who my anesthesiologist is. And, you just kind of instantaneously see their walls kind of come down, their guard come down, feeling a little bit more relaxed. Like Linda mentioned, patients telling you that they're proud of you, happy to see you in this position, because it's so important for us to create like that environment of support for our patients.
A couple days ago was National Female Physician Day, right? I may be mixing up some of the words, but kudos to all three of you. I know for me as a friend, I look up to you. You inspire me. It's not easy to wake up every day. Some of you guys wake up at 5 a.m. Some of you all have 24-hour calls. It's tough, but you do it, and you do it with a smile on your face. And that representation means a lot, especially to, younger girls, or, people that want to one day become a physician, or even not even a physician, just be a boss, and hearing from you and hearing about the pros and also hearing about how you overcome challenges is really helpful in their journey. So thanks for sharing that. And that brings me to my next point around Married to Medicine, which is a reality TV show on Bravo. I know I love it. Some of you guys love it. Some of you guys don't watch it, and that's okay. But, on the positive side, I think it brings light to strong Black females that are really killing it in medicine. You have an OBGYN, you have a family medicine practitioner, a dentist. So a wide variety of individuals that are doing a great job. But I believe it was the first show that really highlighted Black female physicians. So what are your thoughts about the show? Do you think we need more shows like this to break the ice, to make people realize that we exist, or even to inspire more individuals to, take a leap and join us in the field?
So I think that reality TV by itself kind of has its challenges. I think it's a nice platform for people to be themselves and to be able to see themselves and how other people can perceive them. Um, and I think it is very unique to see Black female physicians in such a light. But then, when you have this, it's an extraordinary situation. Like, you don't normally have a spotlight on a group of women where arguments are incited when they normally wouldn't be, where people are digging at you in a way that they normally wouldn't in real life. And so that creates situations that don't generally happen in real life. So you may see a fist fight between two Black women, and it's just like, and that's on a platform too. It's not just the good stuff, right? So you'll see, everyone being so successful. You have this Maserati, a beautiful family, and that's great. But then, I just watched you punch this woman in the face, and that's a problem, because it's just an unrealistic lens on a situation that normally wouldn't have happened. So I think it would be great to have more of us in a certain light, more highlights on the kind of lives we live, but in a little more realistic fashion, and like not in this, let's do things for ratings and cause all of this uproar, because it does to an extent destroy some of those wonderful things that we are aspiring to. I mean, you see a lot of these women on these shows end up getting divorced as a result of something that came to light that wouldn't have normally, I think it's there's some good in there that can be highlighted and projected in a more positive way. Um, but I still like the show. I don't
I
know.
really didn't want to like it.
You know?
Like, oh, when it first came out, I was like, oh, I can't believe this. I was like, I'm not going to watch. I watch it. I enjoy it for entertainment
Yeah.
purposes. What I will say is, same thing you said. I mean, it comes with highlighting the unfortunate parts of what reality has, which is drama and fighting. And I will be honest, I sometimes don't know how the ladies, despite the respect that I have for what they do in their careers, I don't know how they maintain them and the respect from their patients with them watching the interactions. And I would almost like it better if there was a place where we could be highlighted that looked more like, there's a show on E, you know how Botched comes on E, and then it's female plastic surgeons, and they really just exclusively show their greatness in the workplace and completely omit the social, and you still can look at it and be like, yeah, they're bosses. That would be better. And you just omit the stuff that I personally wouldn't want people to have access to, which is my safe space. So I think there could be some improvements.
I'm gonna sit this one out because I don't watch the show.
Is that by choice or is that by circumstance?
There's so many reality TV shows out there. I just think it gets overwhelming to tune into all of them. If I were to watch it, probably would watch it, but I just haven't happened to watch it. I think, like you, I didn't think I would have liked it. I didn't think it would be something for me, but now that you guys are speaking so highly of it, maybe I'll give it a chance.
Yeah,
All
you got to
right.
give it like a little, like a several episodes though. It's not an immediate like Real Housewives of Atlanta. Like, oh my god,
Yeah, it's one of those
it
things, like,
takes a
it's
little
just like,
while.
almost like it's too close to home, like, I can watch drama with people that I cannot identify with on any level, but
Right.
now it's like, oh, these are women that I should be able to identify with, and now I'm watching the drama, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I got
Yeah. Well, if you decide to watch it, the new season premieres in March. So we can
Shameless
definitely get
plug.
a group chat started. So to close out, thank you so much for answering all the tough questions, and I appreciate your time today. But to close out, I wanted to do something fun so the audience can get to know you on a more personal level. So my first question is, I know everyone has their unique gear. How do you individualize your fit for the day?
I told y'all I wear a Black Panther hat every single day. I have them in different colors. And my sneakers, they're usually pretty lit. Like, I used to wear a pair of bright red Harachis like all the time, but now I have like some different colors. I try to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, my scrub hat too, that's usually how I get my own style. My mom made me a bunch of Ankara print scrub caps that I usually rotate throughout the week, and then try to add different sneakers, maybe my OR jacket that I wear over my scrubs. At my main hospital, we're not so picky about what type of scrubs you wear in the OR, so I'll like mix and match my scrub top pants and bottoms and just try to make it unique.
So in the office, I pretty much wear whatever I would ordinarily wear, but at the hospital when I'm in my scrubs, I personalize it. Now, typically my hair is not back like this. It's very large natural hair, which struggles to fit under OR caps. So I have custom OR caps that are large that can, you know, hold my natural hair, which draw a lot of attention, and they're usually very colorful, and I love it. And I usually wear a winged eyeliner because the rest of my face is covered, and it adds a little bit of personality.
Hmm.
Agree. Yes.
Eyebrows gotta be on fleek. Eyebrows gotta be done.
Lashes. Okay.
So the next question is about your post-call routine. What do you typically do after that 24-hour call? Do you hit the couch first? Are you gonna binge watch anything? What do you guys typically do?
Man, it depends on the call night. I mean, on a good call night, if I have like the whole post call day, I might take a little nap. And then I try to spend the rest of the day with my daughter. She is 19 months. And I kind of like those post call days because I can just chill and hang with her.
I'll take a shower as soon as I get home and put on my PJs, make some brunch, have a mimosa, watch something ridiculous on TV on Netflix, and then I'll go to bed. And I'll probably like stay in my bed for most of the day.
I like to veg out. Like I'll do my self-care stuff, but I will literally sit on the sofa and watch the Ion Network for like hours on end, like Criminal Minds, whatever it is, and just let it play and I doze in and out of sleep.
Well, I know sometimes when I text you guys on your post call day, I don't expect a response until maybe the following day. And that's completely fine because it's tough to be alert for 24 hours. A lot of people don't even know what that feels like. So kudos to you for taking that on. So the last question is around, pre-COVID, what is your go-to vacation spot?
I'm going to Africa, like going to Ghana, going to Ivory Coast immediately.
I I had a trip to Thailand and Vietnam that was planned in February, and maybe like I think it was like 2 weeks before my scheduled trip, we started hearing about this Wuhan coronavirus, and I was like, oh, that's not going to stop me. Like, what do you mean? And, and then the travel agency that I booked with like canceled the whole trip, and I was gonna rebook by myself because I'm stubborn. And then I realized, oh wait, like this is something serious. So that's a trip that I need to take as soon as we're ready to travel again. I really want to explore that area of East Asia, and Greece is kind of like my ideal vacation as well. I've never been to Greece, but I really want to go.
I didn't grow up in a family of travelers, at least not internationally. So I have still never crossed the Atlantic. I've never been to the continent of Africa or Europe. And I was, I had just gotten my big girl paychecks, and then coronavirus came and destroyed my plans. But when the world looks a little more familiar, we're probably going to go to Italy and do some like, European bouncing around. And that's the goal. I've never been, but that's what I want to do.
Excellent. Dr. Linda, Dr. Ashley, and Dr. Kemi, thank you so much for your time. I can't believe we've reached the end of season 1. Thank you so very much for your support of Just Win with Wanda. This has been a phenomenal journey and we've had amazing guests. If you haven't already, please show this podcast love by leaving a review and subscribing today to join the JWWW family. Thanks again for rocking with me, and I can't wait for you to hear season 2. It's coming this spring and you don't want to miss it. Talk to you very soon.